Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Seth, one of the co-hosts of Engage Podcast, to bring you today a very unique, very special episode of Engage Podcast. 2020 has been quite the year. This crazy year was the year that we started this podcast, and it was before the whole COVID thing happened. But one of the things that happened in this year that we did not expect was that the Leader to Leader series would become so popular. It was only meant to be a few week, like little mini series, but it just took a life of its own. And every guest we interviewed, we got a list of people for us to contact and try to interview. And it just led, one thing led to another, led to another. So today I want to kind of highlight some of our favorite moments from those leader to leader interviews. And for the first one, I want to start with was one of my favorite episodes that we've done, and that was when we sat down with Joe Flynn of Flynn's Tires. Now, if you live in the Western PA, Eastern Ohio area, you know Flynn's Tires, but to sit down and actually pick the brain and talk to the owner was such a privilege for us, and it was so cool that we got to record it and put it out there for the world. So for the first reflection, I guess you could call it that, the first reflection episode that I want to kind of highlight is just like it's a 10-minute moment in that podcast that really, to me, was just a surreal moment. And it was just such a soul-feeding, heartwarming moment. So give it up for this segment, this little piece of Joe Flynn's interview that we did with him a few months back.
So, Joe, we are sitting here, and this place is pretty impressive, really big. Tell us the history about Flynn's Tires.
Sure. So, well, actually, this building, the building itself, Wall Street Journal printing press, he also printed the local newspapers. And I worked here midnight shift for 4 years while I was going to school. So
get out.
No, yeah. So I worked here. I came in probably every Saturday from 8 o'clock at night. I was here till 2 o'clock in the morning. And we stuffed. What we did is we came in and for the Sharon Herald, the Sunday Herald, because at that time, the Herald was bought and sold, and they do their own printing now. But at the time, years ago, they printed it here, at least the Sunday version, and we would put the ads in the comics, and then when the papers would start printing, we would stuff those pre-stuffed comics with all the ads in from Kaufman's or wherever at the time. Cool. We put it in the papers and we bundled them and we shipped them out, and they got loaded up out the door.
So then you remember what this building looked like?
Yep. When this podcast is over, I'll take you guys for a little tour and show you where the printing presses were and the pressmen and where I was. I wasn't allowed to go in most of the building, but
that's cool.
Yep.
Wow.
That's very cool.
So yeah, but it is definitely a big building. We'll eventually have a warehouse here, I think, because it's centrally located. But we just haven't been able to do that yet. So
well, you'll get there.
Yeah,
you'll get there. So tell us about Flynn's Tire. Tell us about the history. I know you mentioned that your father has had an important role. So tell us all about it.
Yeah. So the history of Flynn's Tire. So Flynn's Tire was started in 1964 on Sharpsville Avenue. This is I know the people at home can't see that, but that's the original building. You know where Our Gang's restaurant is?
Yeah.
Well, the parking lot of Our Gang's is where our first location was. So it was Uray Company Incorporated.
What's the name there? How's that?
So the name of that is actually so our name is still Uray Company Incorporated, DBA. We do business as Flynn's Tire, but in 1964, my grandfather, this is a picture of my grandfather, when he started the company with my dad and my uncle, they started the three of them together. Back then there was no internet, right? So to incorporate, they had to pick a name and they filled out a form and they mailed it in, and 8 weeks later they'd get a response. And whatever names they originally picked, like Flynn Incorporated, somebody had already done that somewhere in the country. So after a couple attempts, my grandfather said, he was born in Ireland, so the old Irish language of Gaelic. He said, "I'll pick a name nobody's ever picked before," because they get a rejection. But it was 8 weeks later, so he picked the name Uray, which means in the old Irish language it means dependable. Wow. So technically, we're Dependable Company Incorporated.
No kidding.
So, Uray Company Incorporated.
Wow.
So and that's
really
my
cool.
grandfather, John Joseph Flynn Sr. I'm actually John Joseph Flynn III. I go by Joe, my middle name. My dad went by his middle name, and my son is the fourth. He goes by his middle name too, Joe. So I don't know how that all started, but that's where I'm
tradition
at.
now.
Yeah, it's tradition now. I can't change it.
Did you know him? Like, did you have the
So
opportunity?
he died when I was 4 years old. So I have some recollection of him, but as a 4-year-old kid, just
Yeah.
from that perspective. And then my dad. This is a picture of my dad. So he passed away in 2002. So he started. My dad, my uncle, and my grandfather started together. So that's a picture of my dad, and that was 1964. We moved then to the Mercer store. So this was the original one that I just showed you. Then we moved out to Mercer. I don't know if you're familiar with that, on 62.
Yes.
And that's what that building looked like at the time. And so we were based out of here, and then based out of here, and then we moved here in 2013. So, and then that's the
Is the Mercer one still functioning?
So we just shut down the Mercer store because we moved the commercial to Hubbard. We had retail in Hermitage and Grove City, and then we put the last straw was our warehouse in Mercer was 38,000 square feet, and we just moved it to Masury with 150,000 square feet, which is, we really needed the extra space, and we couldn't do it there in Mercer. So it served us well, but at that point it just didn't make financial sense to keep it open.
Right.
So it's but that's what happens. You grow, and sometimes you got to move on. But
Yeah.
So you have a family history of the business. You mentioned your grandfather, your father, uncle, I think, in there. They were clearly influential for you, right?
yes,
What elements were? What was influential for you? What were the big things that you learned and try to implement in your life? What qualities in them did you see that you try to live and implement in your own world?
yeah. So my dad, he was the biggest influence in my life. He used to. He would bring me in to work with him when I was a kid all the time, and he would. I just got to hang out with my dad while he was working. I would play here. We were just talking about that, and not necessarily here, but at work. And we would. I looked at work as fun. And as I grew up, so my dad had me, when I was a little kid, I would just come in and play. I would build cardboard clubhouses. I would climb through the tires. It was just a big playland for me. And I still look at it as a big playland, to be very honest. But because I love what I do. But then I started to, unload trucks and load trucks, and started to help out in the warehouse, and started to help out in the retail store. And then when I turned 16, started delivering tires, and then worked in the warehouse for a couple years, and then started selling tires at the retail counter, mounted tires right before that, and worked in the shop. And so then when I graduated, I went to Grove City College, which is local here. When I graduated from Grove City College, I ran the Mercer store for a little while, and then my dad just said, "You know what I want you to do is just follow me around. I just need you to follow me around. I'm not a good teacher, but if you follow me around, I would you'll pick some things up." So he would take me everywhere. So when he met with the bank, I'd be with him. When he met with the vendors, I'd be with him. And so when he passed away, I had a good foundation of how the business worked, and I knew everybody associated with the business, from everybody that worked in the business to all of our suppliers and vendors and customers. So it was a good experience. My dad was a good person. People who worked around my dad, they genuinely loved my dad, and he was a great guy. Now he also, every day when we would leave work, in the car, he would say the Our Father, and he would thank God for the business that we had and the people that we had, And so, so when my kids come with me, that's what I do with them because I just remember that with my dad. And
That's cool.
yeah, it was he was a good guy.
All right, and then for our next guest, our next segment that I want to highlight is one that we did with, again, this is another recent interview that we did with the amazing guest known as Joseph Altenor of the Haitian Sensation. This was an interview that I was a different person when I left than I was when I walked in. Joseph has this charisma. He has this passion that when you're just sitting next to him, it just, you can't help but just feel it. And this particular moment in this interview was one of those moments where I kind of like, I didn't feel like, I felt like we were in a dream because of just how just, incredible it was. And this piece of advice and this words of wisdom from Joseph is just priceless. And it's such a great for you and myself to kind of keep in the back of our heads as we go into the new year. So give it up for our friend Joseph Altenor as we highlight this part of his episode.
So, Joseph, I have a paper here with your mission on it, and I'm going to read that for the folks out there. It says, our mission is to inspire and enable the Haitian population to develop a productive future, to help protect their basic human rights on their journey toward making a positive difference in their country's destiny. So tell us a little bit about that mission statement. How did you come up with it? What does it mean?
Well, if you, I don't know if anybody been to Haiti, and they're all such a wonderful people, but yet they're also oppressed by the government. Basically, the basic living life, the fundamental of life, they don't have that privilege. They don't have the need, that everyday needs that they all need for people to live. Is pretty hard for them. But they are such a loving people, and any opportunity that you give them, they will get a hold of it and make something out of it. So for me, if I can do something to make a difference in their lives, to give them an opportunity just to live just basic life. So I think that's what this is all about when it started, is to be able to help them and create something for them so they can hold on to it and make something out of themselves so they can live a normal life.
When you say normal life or the basics of life, what does that mean? I'm thinking about folks listening that may not understand, what's going on or the culture there. Tease that out a little bit. What don't they have, as a people group, or what's preventing them from flourishing?
Well, Haiti is this: you have rich people in Haiti, and you have poor people in Haiti. It's like there's almost no in between. So those ones that are very unfortunate, it's hard for them to eat. It's hard for them to go to school. It's hard for them to support their family, even though they are very hardworking people, but they do not get that opportunity to be able to provide for their own family, to pay for their own education. Kids do not go to school in Haiti. If you don't have any money, you do not get to go to school. So you have 23, 25 years old young men that are still in middle school. Why? Because during the course of their growing up, is like they cannot finish a year of school, because if their parents do not have the money to send them to school, they get to send back. If they don't have a proper pen and pencil and a notebook or a uniform, because every school requires uniform, they get to send back home. So they might be lucky to finish maybe 6 months in the year, and they can finish school. So and then the next year they'll repeat the same class again. So the idea is to be able to have something there so you can have and create some sort of ways that they can create some revenue so they can pay for their own education. So they don't have to ask, they don't ask for a handout. They really don't. They just ask the opportunity to be able to give them something to, so they can work very hard and to support their own family so they can pay for their own education. If you are poor in Haiti, you don't have that luxury. You can't go to school. So that's what I mean by that. And even furthermore, is just eating. A simple meal. You know, we have a village that we adopted in Haiti. There's a school there that's about 300, 400 students there. They're required to pay 70 cents a day for them to eat lunch. Only 70 of those students are able to do that. The rest of them, if you don't give them some help, they don't get to eat. And you do not know if they go home, if they're going to have a meal at home. So these are the things that are just a basic need, basic human need that you need to be able to live, that they do not have that opportunity to be able to live as we are living here.
Well, I commend you for your mission here to help. And that's, of course, that's personal for you because you've came to the United States, correct?
Mm-hmm.
When did that happen? When did you make the transition? And then why did you make the transition?
Well, I came here at 19 years old. I was living in Florida, and I moved to New York City, and I got a job in New York City, and then moved from New York City. My job moved in this area in Charlottesville.
Wow! So you went from New York City to Sharpsville.
To Charlottesville. So here I am in Charlottesville. I'm in manufacturing. I do manufacturing for a living. For 26 years, I was doing manufacturing, and then this disaster happened in 2010. The earthquake.
The earthquake in Haiti.
In Haiti, which killed over 200,000 people. In 2010, they were doing a fundraiser right here at Case Elementary School. Tracy Valentino get with all the kids and they went to local businesses and asked for donation. They asked for family members, friends for donations. They were able to raise $10,000. And they were presenting a check to Red Cross. They have asked me to be a guest speaker. A friend of mine called me and asked me to be a guest speaker. And when I went there, I was blown away. The thing that the kids were able to do, the little sign, waving Haitian flags in the air, little phrase in Creole and French, because the fact would speak two languages in Haiti. I was speechless. I didn't know what to say to those kids until the following day. I asked the principal if she would allow me to go to the school and spend the day and go to class and speak to those kids and then also express my gratitude for what they have done. I can't remember this, it's just I'm sitting here. I was speaking to one class and it dawned on me. I'm like, if those kids can do this, to be able to raise that much money for Haiti, here I am I was born and raised in Haiti. I said, I need to do something to go there and help, because I know how much hard of a time that they were having in Haiti after the earthquake. And I said, okay, I'm going to start a little coffee shop, because the fact is I know we have great coffee in Haiti. We love coffee in this country. So I say, if I can import a coffee from Haiti and I can have a little coffee shop here, that will give me a way to create some revenue so I can go there and help. And that's how it started, starting to do a little food and then taking to the coffee shop, and then people get to love it. And I was cooking at the Funny Farm on 18. It used to call it Funny Farm. I created a big grill so I can cook rice and beans and chicken on the firewood. on firewood, and people start buying the food from the flea market, from the funny farm, and then people get to love the food, and the rest of it is history, man. And here I am today, and I've worked in the restaurant and a full-time missionary, doing what we do. My wife and I we are very blessed, man. We are very blessed to be able to have an opportunity to be Jesus Christ's hands and feet, be the Lord's servant. That's how we end up here. That's how we're here.
And so, speaking of here, we're at your restaurant right now. For those who are listening, Seth and I stopped here yesterday for some coffee and to meet you. Tell us the story again of how you transitioned when you were looking for a restaurant, and how this place opened up, and how that God had worked his hand in getting you here.
Yeah. I was downtown Sharon, a little place downtown Sharon, and I was very, very fortunate to have a place that I was paying a very low rent to be able to start the coffee shop. And at the end, the landlord really didn't want to continue renting to us. He said that they will have to move somewhere else. And at the time, I remember the people that were working for me, Chase Whalen and Kaylin Luce, which is now my daughter because I married her mother. I said, what are we doing? Where are we going? I'm like, I don't know. I said, but there will be a place. So a friend of mine called me and then told me about this place. And I didn't pay any attention. And a month later, his wife called me and told me. He said, Joseph, that place is still available. You need to call. He said, what do you have to lose? I said, you know what? Yeah, you're right. So I called. When I called, I was talking to the landlord, and I asked him how much he wanted for the place. When he told me, I'm like, oh, okay. I was just calling to find out, because there's no way I could afford the place for the price that he was asking. And as I was ready to leave the phone, and he kept on talking to me. He said, so what do you do? So I explained to him what I do. I explained to him the mission about the coffee shop, what I was looking for. And he said to me, I tell you what, just write on a proposal, send it to me, and I will see what we can do. He said, it seems like you are doing a good thing. I said, wow, are you kidding me? So I wrote a proposal, I sent him an email, which I was a little bit embarrassed to put what I could afford on paper to send it to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he messaged me the next day. He said, I'm sending you the list, go ahead and look over it and tell me what you think, and then we'll take it from there. I was like, you have got to be kidding me.
Right.
How is this going to, even at that, even at what I told him I could afford, it still was going to triple the rent that I was paying downtown Sharon. So I was still praying and asking, how am I going to do this? Because if I would have to put it on paper, it wouldn't make sense. To be able, budget-wise, there's no way I could afford the place. So I was at home, we wake up first thing in the morning. I've never made hot chocolate on the stove. I never go in and boil milk and then make hot chocolate. And that morning, I felt like I needed to make some hot chocolate. So I had some chocolate and throw it in the pot, put some milk in there. And I went to the bathroom and came back. There was a perfect cross in the hot chocolate. I had a picture of it. One day, all of those pictures of things that I've seen, signs that God have given me since we started this, they're all gonna be in our next place. They're all gonna be on the wall, so people with the stories, so people can see how actually God had directed me and keeping me in the right path. So that moment, I went and I told my fiance at the time, I said, you have got to be kidding me. Just come and see this. So at that time, we used to go to Grace Chapel, and late Pastor Larry. I remember I went in and had a conversation with him. I explained to him the whole thing. And he put his hand on my shoulders and he said, Joseph, you're on your way. And I called the landlord on the next day. I said, we're taking the place.
And how many years ago was that?
So it's going on 6 years now.
6 years.
It's
you've
going
been
on
here.
6 years.
One of the things that I notice about the Haitian Sensation is you have lots of artifacts, pictures. You really have to see it, to be here in person. Now, when you were cooking, Seth and I were talking, and I asked about, up here you see a lady and it looks like she's drinking something.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another statue of her here.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? What
That's-
is the
that's-
name of it, and what is the story?
That's a guy. That's a guy.
All right, let's start off by correcting that it's a
Well,
male, not a female.
Yeah, this is a guy. He is a very significant person for Haitian people.
Okay.
I remember when I was working, I was in my office. I wasn't there with a friend of mine, Mark Rinelli. He and I were talking. I was always telling him, I said, I'm going to start a company. And he said, I told him, I said, I'm going to call it Haitian Sensation. And I remember we were drawing things on paper, and I was telling him, how about this? How about that? And I came up with a logo.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically a whole bunch of children holding hands around the world. I had a map of the world, and there were a whole bunch of children holding hands. That's what will form the logo, and then we'll say what on top and the bottom, Haitian Sensation. And it was actually final, really. That's what I was going to do. And that happened. I was talking to my oldest daughter, and I was telling her about the company that I was going to start, and she called me the next day. She said, Dad, she said, you remember that guy you always telling us the story when we were little? She said, I think you should incorporate him in your logo. I said, you know what, baby girl, you are absolutely right. So that's how I put him in the center of the logo, and then Haitian on top and Sensation on the bottom.
Well,
His name is Neg Mahon.
Okay.
It's Nemon. Neg, Megmon. Neg Mahon. You can Google him.
Okay.
He was the very first slave in Haiti. And actually, you can see the well on his ankle.
Yes.
The chain is still on his ankle.
Right.
The thing he's holding on the bottom is a machete. You will have to see it like this one here. If you look in there, if you pick that up, on the other side he's holding a wooden machete.
Okay, I got it.
So that's what I make. This one is carved in mahogany wood. That's what this one is made out of. The thing that he's drinking, you see him as he's drinking. He's
Right.
not drinking. That's a conch shell. He's blowing out of.
Okay.
So he escaped as the first slave. As you know, Haiti, there was sons of slave in Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
So he escaped. Every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, he goes to the highest mountain in Haiti, and he was blowing in the conch shell to let all the other slaves know that they need to have courage and do the same thing that he did. That's why this man is very, very significant to the Haitian people.
How do you say his name?
Neg Mahon. Negmon.
Man, am I glad I asked that question. That's awesome.
Okay, Neg Mahon.
That's really cool. And I love that it's in your logo. Yeah, I'm ignorant, and I asked.
Actually, no, I think I misspelled it. So it's Neg. You go with Neg N-E. Mahon is M-A-R-O-N. I forgot the M-A.
Okay.
M-A-R-O-N.
Awesome.
Neg Mahon.
What an awesome story, and I love how that encapsulates what you're doing in the story of the Haitian Sensation. It's that courage and that willingness to overcome
The resilient.
and believe in something greater and something bigger that God has called you to. But I like how it doesn't just end with you, right? You're blessed to be a blessing. So this whole thing encapsulates that, right? Everything you do is not just for you. It doesn't end with you. You're finding ways to bless others, and you're blessing the people in Sharon just by your witness, your testimony, making great food and having great coffee. But it's even going further than that and helping your people in Haiti. So this is really nice.
Yeah.
Really, really, really cool. I'm glad we're here to help elevate that.
Yeah, you have been an answer to a lot of people's prayers. I can guarantee that. I mean, even just the fact that we had breakfast today, right? Whenever we pray the Lord's Prayer, what do we always ask for? For daily bread, right? So we pray for God to feed us, and that happened today. So that was a prayer that on a small scale, that was answered today. One of the things, like a quote that. Before we did the Leader to Leader podcast segment, we would do a segment where we would take a quote and we would read it and then we would discuss it and we would talk about it. And there was a quote that was on the list of us to get to that, as we're talking, is going through my head. It's by Francis Chan, who said, "Sometimes I want to ask God why he allows poverty, famine, and injustice when he could just do something about it. But I'm afraid to ask because he might just ask me the same question." And I look about what you're doing, and it's such a cool thing. And when Pastor Anthony was talking, it hit me, which was by you wanting to bless and help the people in Haiti, which is such a cool thing. You're also helping and blessing the people who are here as well. And very few times when people do mission work does it bless two different countries. And I think that's it. I don't know why it just didn't hit me until just now, that by you having this shop, by selling coffee and selling food and just being you, that you're helping one of the most prosperous nations that's ever existed, as well as helping a country that is dear and nearest to your heart. And that's such a cool thing, and it just really goes to show how God can take what we do and just bless so many people with it.
It's funny that you mentioning this, because what we do here, that's the reason why we do mission trip.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason why we do mission trip. We take people from here, group of people, every year we go to a mission trip in Haiti. We adopted this one little village, and which, by the way, that was the village I was born in. That village.
Okay.
And we go there and we choose a project. And the project that we chose, we raise money through our different events that we do, to the restaurant. And we go there, we purchase all the material, we hire people from the village, and we all work together in that project. The beauty of it is that we are blessed as a country. United States of America blessed. We are blessed, and we are very fortunate to be in this country. If you were born in this country, you are fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go there, through our mission trip, to the things that we are doing there, those people get to come back here with a different perspective.
Mm.
Because from the very beginning, for me, my mindset was trying to convert it. Every single person that goes to a mission trip with us converted their mind to be mission-minded.
Mm.
Once we make that decision to become mission-minded and we understand mission, selfishness goes away. You're no longer a selfish person. You're looking at what it is that I can do every single day I get out of bed. What is it that I can do to help somebody else?
Yeah.
You put yourself last, which that's what we're supposed to do.
Right.
We don't look for recognition when we do something good, because that's what we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is to do good things to people.
Mm-hmm.
So as you are helping people, Now all of a sudden you started to notice area in your life that you didn't notice before, how you can help somebody else. You starting seeing that your next door neighbor's grass might need cut. While I'm cutting mine, my goodness, I have the ability to cut mine. It doesn't take me long to cut theirs.
Yeah.
Let me cut theirs. But they can shovel their snow. It might be an elderly person. It might be a person that are hurt.
Yeah.
You help them. You shovel the snow. You don't look for a thank you. You don't look for recognition. You just do it because you know that's what God wants us to do. That's what we are supposed to do, is to help one another.
Yeah.
So through that, through mission, you're starting to have and be that mission minded, because now you get to see all of those people in Haiti that barely have nothing, but yet they have everything. They have a faith in God. They will give you the shirt off their back. They will offer you everything they have because they are grateful that you are there, because you bring them hope. The government's not doing anything for them. Their hope is through their prayers and the people that God brought into their life every single year,
Yeah.
to be able to see your face, to be able to develop that relationship with you, to be able to help you understand how fortunate we are here.
Yeah.
If we can and see how joyful and how loving they are, even though they do not have any material things. So imagine if we can take all that love that they have, all that joy, all that faith, and then come here with it, with all the material thing that we have, all the blessing that we have, how much we'll be able to help other people.
Yeah.
How much we'll be able to put our differences aside and then just join in together as human beings. As human beings, guess how beautiful that will be.
For our next segment, this was one of the first episodes. Actually, I'm sorry, this was the first episode that we did of the Leader to Leader series, and we sat down with Michael T. Muha, who's a commissioner here in the Hermitage area. And this one is just—it's one of those episodes. Even though it was our first one, even though the audio quality isn't as great as some of the most recent ones we've done, it still was such a rich conversation. And this one kind of became me and Pastor Anthony's mantra, of our whole ministry, whether it be the podcast or whether it be the videos we put on YouTube. So it was kind of cool. And this is actually one of the least listened to episodes. And I don't really know why, because personally, it's one of the more, again, soul filling episodes that we've done. So give it up for our friend Michael T. Muha and his segment from his episode.
Go ahead. Next one.
All right, so professionally, so you've got two really big callings, I would call them, in your
Yeah.
life. It seems like you didn't choose them; they chose you almost, which is a calling.
Yeah.
What is tell us the most gratifying part of both of those callings?
It's the ability to help people but to do it on a level that it works for me. I think generally, I'm a big believer in the idea that if you don't have a calling, but if you find something you really love, try to do that, but try to help people through that. Whether it's being a pastor or being involved in broadcasting like you are, or whatever, just like the ability to help people, to inspire people, to provide guidance to people if they need it. And it just happens to be that my way is through the law and through public service. That to me is easily the most gratifying thing, is being able to help somebody through and essentially make people feel good, make people feel. I don't want to go too deep and too dark on this, but a lot of the horrible things that are going on in the world right now, particularly with the protests and police brutality and things like that, the one thing that I'll say about that is, and how it ties into this is, I have a strong belief that people, by and large, just want to be seen and they want to be heard. And for a long time, people, whether they're racial minorities or LGBT or whatever, they're either not seen or they're not heard. And what my role is to make people seen and make people be heard and listen to what they have to say, and then try to implement those things in a way that benefits society as a whole. I guess you could call me a utilitarian at that point. Like whatever helps the common good. And if it does, I'm in favor of it. People need to be seen and people need to be heard. And for a long time, in different areas of the country or different places or different times, people aren't seen or people aren't heard. And so my role is to try to make people seen and make people heard. In the case of like custody or divorce, in a lot of cases, people their interests aren't brought to the forefront. And what court does is it allows people to air grievances, to talk about what's going on in a relationship, or talk about what's going on with their relationship with a child and things along those lines. I've been in very serious heated custody battles between a mom and a dad who may hate each other's guts, but they love their child equally, and trying to fight over who has the child more than the other. And sometimes they use their children or their child as a pawn, which is really, really sad, and it's awful. And I try not to get involved in that. But in other times, they have differing opinions. There's a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of disagreement. But by and large, they love their children equally. And so what my role is try to push out what my client believes, and so my client is seen and is heard, and allow a judge to decide, or a trier of fact, whoever, to decide who whose opinion matters more, and who what's in the best interest of the child, things along those lines. So in the end, I'd say gratification is definitely trying to help people.
Very good. Seen and heard. We could argue easily that a lot of Jesus's ministry, if you read the Gospels, was doing that very thing.
Absolutely.
He was always very close with the down and the hurting, while it was people who were far off that were sort of with their fingers out pointing.
Yep.
But as Jesus got closer and heard their story, that's where compassion comes in.
Absolutely. Empathy is key. Empathy is absolutely the most important, in my opinion, is the most important virtue.
Empathy.
Understanding what people are going through, but not only empathy, but also acting on that empathy. Not only knowing and understanding how people feel, but in trying to find ways to help people and acting on it. It's not enough to just say, "Oh, I hear you. Oh, I feel you." But you actually have to do something about it. You have to take action.
Well, James, that's what we do here.
Yes.
We like to connect things with the Bible.
Of course.
And in the book of James, he actually talks about sins of commission, the things that you do. It's like, don't steal.
Yes.
But he talks about sins of omission. Right? And so that's what I hear you saying a lot of is it's the absence of an action, right?
Yeah.
For our next one was one of the most surreal episodes we recorded, and that was when we sat down with the newly elected mayor of Newcastle, Chris Fry. Chris Fry was a fantastic guest, and one that we definitely want to, we want to get him back on the show. I know me and Pastor Anthony both were just amazed by just how down to earth he was, how practical he was, and how just a strong man of God that he is. So this is a segment from his episode that I think really just captures who he is as a person and what he believes and what he's all about. And anyone who's ever sat down and talked to Chris knows that this is how he is, just throughout everyday life. This isn't a front. This isn't an act. This is really who he is. So sit back and enjoy this little segment from our interview with Chris Fry. I know you're going to like it.
So let me ask you this. How old are you?
I'm 32.
32 years old. Talk to us a little bit about your influences in your life. Who were they? What qualities do you admire in them? And then share with us a little bit about how you try to implement some of those qualities in your own life.
Okay. I mean, early on, I've had multiple influences, and I think that's important to say because, you know, obviously there's different transitions that I've gone through in life that somebody has kind of I've always looked at somebody as the influence and how to help me get through this point, this time I'm in now. So I'll have to say my mom, number one. My mom was, you know, that one that was there constantly in my life and continues to be there for me day in and day out. And she showed me how to work. She showed me how to work and live a life of faith and believing in Christ. You know, my upbringing, it wasn't easy. We were an impoverished family, lived in Habitat House. You know, we're transient, moving from area to area for a while there. And, you know, my mom just was her ability to endure and be persistent in raising 4 kids was, you know, to me she was my hero, you know. I didn't need like Superman or the Hulk or Michael Jordan, anybody to inspire me to live day to day, because there's so much more to it. You know, it's the recipe. It's what we were just talking about. There's a recipe to life, just like there's an hour prep time, right? There's hours that are put in on a daily basis by that person, and there are those people that are there with you all the time, and then you can get motivated and be influenced by what you see on TV and what those other folks do. But what's their day to day? That's kind of how I see those influential people in my life. And I had when I went to college, Dr. Paris Baker. He was my professor. I call him my professor, my mentor. He was my pastor. He was, you know, a good friend of mine, and he still, to this day, is a great sounding board and helped me through college, because college for a young, underprivileged kid out of Newcastle presented a lot of challenges. So in day to day, again, I go back to day to day, how he lived his life as that person. I looked at him as like to see how should I live my life here to be successful as he did, rather than the whole party scene and the drinking, drive, you know, all that crazy stuff. I looked at it as, you know, my purpose was to come here and do something with it, and Pastor Baker was a great example during that time. And then, you know, I have multiple, my uncles, my Uncle Pete, my Uncle Joe, in Newcastle have been great inspirations to me again, and I use them for my family, right? How they raise their family, so I got multiple different influences in my life. Sorry, that's the boring answer. I don't have like the.
It's cool.
No,
it's not Michael Jordan, but I like Michael Jordan, but it's not Michael Jordan.
Did you watch his documentary?
I haven't.
No.
No, I stream everything. My stream wasn't working, so
Okay.
I have to
check it out.
Yeah, I use those for my sons. Obviously, I use you know, examples like that for my sons. But at the same time, I'm like, you know, who's the one there day to day that you can look up to and get? Because what it boils down to, you're not gonna go, you know, Google Michael Jordan videos every time a situation happens.
Sure.
You're gonna call somebody.
Sure.
And that person that you can trust.
And that's important to have someone. The people who are what I like to think about as the rhythm of your life. It's the regular, everyday things that you're watching. Absolutely. Learning is not taught as much as it's caught. And so you looked at, and we're wise enough too, I think, and that's important, to absorb those lessons through the people closest to you. One of the things I want you to tease out for us is, you mentioned when you went to college that there were challenges that you faced that were maybe a little bit different than others. What would be an example of that?
Oh man, every day was a challenge. College was, number one, I had to leave home and I had to fend for myself. I had to find out.
Where did you go to college?
I went to Gannon University.
Okay.
In Erie, PA. I'll say this, you know, it was the college experience. You know, that was the one thing back then that everybody was looking for and wanted to get into, and I am a firm believer there is no college experience. Life continues on and life gets harder as soon as you get to college. As soon as your parents drive off or whoever drops you off leaves, life just gets harder no matter what. The college experience is, I think it's that it puts you to the test in terms of, can you survive in this atmosphere? Can you hold a job? Can you be successful? Can you manage your life? And I made a mistake the first semester I was there to try to experience that. It was typical kid partying, drinking, playing video games all day and all night. Getting into the intramural sports. Where's the fun at? That was the mentality that we had, and it hit me pretty hard. And there was a moment after my first semester where I remember going home and I'm not ashamed to say it, my grades were terrible. I think I had a 1.9 GPA or something like that.
I'm familiar with that GPA.
Yeah.
You're talking to a guy that's familiar with that
Yep.
GPA.
I remember sitting down and reading that letter, looking at my mom, and I said, "Mom, what do I do now?" And they didn't kick me out. They said, if you decide to come back, you got to enroll in placement classes and work your way out of it. And she said, you could take the easy way, come home, work at a normal job here in town, and do that until you figure it out, or you can go back and it's a challenge. And I wanted the challenge. It wasn't about college. I know college isn't for everybody. It was the challenge. It was, do I run from the challenge or do I attack it head on? And I was like, I'm gonna do this. Looked at my mom. Oh yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm not gonna let this defeat me. So I went back and put my head down for the next 3.5 years and came out on top.
Very nice.
3.5 GPA graduated with.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
It's hard once you start like that to build
yes.
that back up.
Yep.
It reminds me of a story. When I left high school, I went to Georgia to a small Christian school called Toccoa Falls College. And that was about 12 or 13 hours away. And that was a big deal, which we're not going to get into now, about leaving the family and all that. It was a make or break moment. But I remember talking to my cousin David, and he said, I want to tell you a story about when I went to school. He went to, I believe it was Slippery Rock. And he said on the first day of freshman orientation, the guy giving the talk had all of the freshmen get up and stand in a line when he was done. And he said, now I want every one of you to look to the left, and I want every one of you to look to the right. And one of you will not be back next semester. And he said, and you're leaving your family, you've got a big calling on your life, but it's going to be easy for you to be one of those people that won't go back. He said, you make sure you're one of those people that goes back.
Yeah.
Now, with that in mind, here's what's crazy. I only thought about that for me. But that next semester when I went back, I'd go to so-and-so's room, knock on the door, not there. The room's cleared out.
Right.
Now, they never said anything because I think they were embarrassed that they were failing out. But it was those same kids that I saw running around acting crazy that never came back.
You're right.
So,
All right, so for our next segment, our next group that we want to highlight was one that we did back in September, where me and Pastor Anthony sat down and interviewed a group of strong women in our community. And there were, I want to say, there were 3 interviews altogether. This one was a kind of a highlight of that little mini series that we did, although they were all great. Margaret Lucas was another fantastic one that you should definitely go back and re-listen to. But this one specifically was one that me and Pastor Anthony both walked out of the interview and we went, that is $1 million idea. That is an idea worth going to Shark Tank with. And these 2 ladies, their name is Holly Masters and Allie Lizzo Linton. They have this idea. It's called the Purpose Therapy Box. And what it is you just customize different items to go into this box, and then you can send it to a loved one in a nursing home. You can send it to your grandparents, even if they're not in a nursing home. You can send it to them, and it's fun activities for them to do, to keep their brain sharp, to let them know that you still care about them, that you love them. And I can't think of a better thing to give someone, to give your grandmother, to give your loved one during COVID, when people are all shut in anyways. But we had a great time with them. Unfortunately, the audio quality on this one is not at its best, as you probably can hear. It's probably one of the worst audio quality episodes that we did. This was because we had an issue with a microphone moments before we started recording. But but I cleaned it up as much as I possibly can. It's well worth your time. And this episode is probably one of the most downloaded episodes from that mini series that we did, and there's a reason why, because what is said here is fantastic. So this little segment, not only do they describe what's in the box, but they also give their reasons why they do what they do. They give kind of some background into what gave them the motivation to do this, and as well, they also kind of just dive into really who they are as people. So this is a lengthy one, but it is a fantastic little segment from our episode with them. So give it up for Holly Masters and Allie Linton.
So what led you to the occupational therapy? What inspired you to go that route?
So I always wanted to work with older adults, and so I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in that field or how I was going to get into it. And a friend of mine actually was a little bit older than me, and she went away to college, and I kind of lost touch with her. And when she came back to town, she was telling me how she went for occupational therapy, and I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. I was like, I've never heard of that before. So she kind of explained what it does, what you do in occupational therapy, and she went to Pitt, but then I found out that right down here at Penn State Shenango and Sharon, they had the assistant program, and so I sat in on a couple of classes and volunteered in the area and realized that it was for me.
Yeah. So both of you do that, and that's primarily, I mean, that's about helping people, right?
Yeah. So you can work across the lifespan in occupational therapy. So I also work with kids at the hospital, but I also work with older adults. You can work in any setting, school, hospital, skilled nursing facility, anything like that. There's so many avenues, but we try to help people stay independent, especially the older adult population that we primarily work with, staying independent or being able to adapt their daily activities to be able to complete them on their own or, with some sort of adaptation.
So what's the biggest obstacle that people face when you're trying to get them to be independent?
Yeah, so a lot of people, they're restricted by their environment. So say they have like a hip replacement or shoulder problems and they can't reach as hard as they used to cook things, or things are heavier for them. But also lately we've seen a lot when we're in practice is just like the loneliness and isolation factor, that people are like less motivated, they don't feel as connected to their families or have that social interaction aspect is really limited now. So figuring out meaningful occupations for them that they can complete safely and either in like a room with their family or still at a distance, that's been kind of our most recent challenge with patients, really.
That's tough, because the older you get, the less friends you have and family, because they pass away or people move out of town. I mean, I see that here as a pastor, when I make my calls or visits, and you can just feel it when you walk in the house. People are very lonely.
Yeah.
We actually started something sort of in that area. I mean, we had to put the brakes on everything because of COVID, but we started a widow and widower group targeting that group. And, it's been relatively successful. It's not huge. I thought that it would be bigger than it was. It's very basic, where it would be once a month, a group of people would get together. Everyone would bring out like a side, and there wasn't a lot of plans. There was maybe like a reading or something, but it was mainly to pull people out of their houses and make those connections, because people were extremely lonely.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's good what you two are doing. So you mentioned boating. You're newly married, and so we all have these influences in our lives, right? People that come along and inspire us. Do us a favor, tell us a little bit about some of those influences in your own life, not only who they were, but tease out the qualities. What are the things you admire in their lives that have influenced you?
Right. Well, I would say for me, my grandparents owned a business. They were from Newcastle, and so growing up, I was always around them. We would always go down and visit every single weekend, and would be around the business and help out and do what we can. And so just growing up in that and seeing like the resilience and the hard work and like knowing that, you know, they were overcoming obstacles in their business, and at the time maybe not really fully understanding it, but now that I own my own business, I can relate to it more now. But just seeing how they were able to, you know, create this great thing that people know about and respect, and they were able to overcome these obstacles and put in that hard work to create something that was great for them and their family and support their family, something that I, you know, inspire to be like with our business.
So, did you go to Newcastle?
I did not. No, both my parents are from Newcastle, but then my dad got a job out here, so they moved before they had kids. But basically, my whole family's from Newcastle. I went to Hickory.
All right, kick it over here. So your grandparents, it was about resilience for them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of my family are very influential to me. Two that stick out the most. One would be my Uncle Joe. He actually was the one that like inspired me to go into occupational therapy. He had glioblastoma, which is a really aggressive form of brain cancer, and this was in 2014. So I was able to get out of high school half a day and go volunteer, be with him through his therapies, and that's how I kind of got to see occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. So I could kind of see the positive and negatives with each career, and he was the one that was like, I think, you know, you'd be a good fit, and my whole family were like, you know, Holly, like, you need to do this. So I think for me, the quality that stuck out with him was just like the hope, and he had a vision for me that he thought would fit before I even had like a vision for myself, which I think now is really meaningful because I was younger then, but you know, he could already see like even though you're young, like you're gonna go on and do such great things. So he definitely believed in me in that aspect. And then my parents, they're both such hard workers, and they pretty much embody like work hard for what you want, you know, and then work on building a life. So you don't need to have everything right off the bat. That's what you look forward to in the future and build off of. And that's really shown in our company too, because, you know, looking back and from when we first started to where we are now, it's awesome to look back and see what we've built just over time and through our experience. So it's definitely all these life lessons that come together.
So the Purpose Therapy box, I mean, I'm familiar with some of those subscription boxes. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what it is, you know, what it costs, what comes in it, what people can expect, how to sign up, you know, all that stuff.
Sure. So the Purpose Therapy box, it's a quarterly subscription, so it comes every 3 months, and family members are able to purchase this subscription for their older loved one. So whether their older loved one lives alone at home or lives in assisted living or a skilled nursing facility, they're able to purchase this, and then we ship it to them. The family members are able to add photos and messages to be included in the box every quarter. So it keeps it personalized. It keeps the families in contact and up to date with each other, even if they can't be with each other all the time. Because a lot of older adults don't have Facebook or have a way to communicate and see photos of the grandkids or things like that. So that was an aspect we really wanted to include in the box. And then each box has an underlying therapy related theme. So cognition, fine motor, strengthening, self-care. We found in our profession that these are the main areas of decline in older adults. So we wanted to highlight those in the box and just try to help. Like I said, you know, we're trying to keep them independent, keep them active, motivated. So we try to send things that are going to do that for them.
So I get the box. Let's pretend I'm old. I am old, but older. And I open it up. What am I finding in the box?
Sure. So I
like how they have this back and forth swap thing. Did you guys talk about this before, or do you like kick each other under the table, or what's exactly happening here?
No, I'm like, you can take that
Yeah,
one.
you're like, that's a horrible question. You go ahead and answer that one.
Yeah. So for an example, we just shipped out our August cognition boxes last month. And it was one of my favorite boxes. It was really cool. So when you first open the box, you're going to see all the pictures of your grandkids or your family, and then their note. Then you see our note to you guys. And in that note, it's like our newsletter. We have like recent events that would like current events and then also what dates back. So we have like fun facts about what happened in August in 1920s, 1930s. So they can kind of flash back to that. We had a lot of good information for them regarding like the coronavirus and how to stay safe and preventative measures. And then we have an activity sheet. So this goes into different levels of Sudoku, different word searches, and then we have riddles for them that they can send us in their answers or mail us in the cards, which is super fun.
Holly loves jokes and riddles,
I
so that's
love
her
it.
favorite
It's
part.
my favorite aspect.
Can you give us a joke or a riddle right now?
Oh man.
You think about it.
Yeah. Oh, I can. I will. Give me a minute. So then product-wise, we had this was really good. It was from Brain Games. We like partnering with them, but it's a different workbook. So instead of having like just Sudoku or just word searches, it was a activity workbook of all-encompassing ones. So whichever ones they prefer, they can do those. Large print. We always make sure try to be accessible to everybody. And then we had organizers. So since it was cognition, we had organizers for the refrigerator that you could stick on, and you can schedule out your day. What else did we have in there?
We've also done, I'm just trying to think.
Oh, the puzzle. So the
Yes.
family sent us, we contacted the families before, and whatever picture they would like, we put that on a puzzle for them. So it's like, this box was extra personalized. And then we had one more. We have so many things, I can't even think right now. But
You're asking the wrong person.
products like that. So we kind of try to be like seasonal too. So for example, November box, we're going to have a couple aspects of like holiday, Christmas for decorating in case they can't go out. But we try to add like 3 kind of functional products and then 1 to 2 seasonal fun products that'll help them.
And so are you two picking everything and you're packaging the boxes, like you're all on hands doing that?
Yeah. We have an office at the East Center in Linden Point, so that's where we fulfill everything, and we're there on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that's when we package and ship everything.
So, with your guys' different like upbringings, Manginos, all that, what do you think that you guys, with your backgrounds, what do you think you bring to the table that makes you guys unique and makes you good at what you do?
I think a really big aspect for us is compassion. Since we work with the older adults and we saw, and continue to see firsthand just the aspects of loneliness and how that negatively affects almost every aspect of their life. I think that's such a valuable aspect of our company that we're addressing. And a lot of people, they know that older adults tend to be, a little bit more depressed or isolated, but they don't have a personal connection or they don't work in a facility and see it firsthand.
Okay.
So I think that makes us different.
Yeah, and I definitely think being able to work in occupational therapy, it helps us get ideas for items to put in the box because we hear it right from their mouth, you know, something that they could utilize or use that they don't have or, their families might not know about to get them as a gift. Everyone gets their family member a mug or a blanket, but something more functional that they can use that's really going to help them. They might not understand that or know where to get it. So that is something that they get from our box that they might not know.
Well, plus, I don't know if you all do the box thing, and when the box comes in, right? It's super
best.
exciting.
That's the
Like
best
if I
part.
go to the mailbox and I see a box there, or if it's sitting on the front steps, I mean, I immediately my attitude changes. I get super excited, and so that's another element that it brings them is that they're looking forward to something and it has arrived.
Yes.
So yeah, that's cool.
That's very cool. So if someone were to want to get into the same field that you guys are in, like, there's someone brand new coming to it and they're like, I want to do what you guys do. Where do I start? How do I do this? What advice would you give them? What would you tell them? How to get started and all that?
Well, where we started, we had this idea and we were still in school at Penn State. And so just trying to utilize any resources that Penn State had to offer us. And then we also I know it's hard right now because of COVID, but we actually went out and we went into the nursing homes, or we met up with people who would be our ideal customer recipient of the box. We talked to them firsthand and we said, this was something that you were receiving, what would you want in it? What would you like? And we actually got that information right from them, rather than us saying like, okay, we think they might want this or that, but actually going to them and seeing what they want gave us more ideas and what we thought they didn't even want. So it was like, just going and being able to gather that information before you even start, because it's a lot easier to start with that information than to have to backtrack and learn that later on.
Yeah. I would definitely say too, I think a lot of people limit themselves when they have a big idea or a big aspiration. They limit themselves and they're like, oh, well, I don't know anything about marketing, or I can't create a logo, or, it's too much time consuming. I think you cannot think like that. You have to challenge yourself. And Allie and I don't have a business background. We're very healthcare based. Our families did own businesses, but in a different kind of realm. But just believing that you can do it. Everybody else, if somebody else can do it, you can do it too.
Yeah.
A lot of just self-learning and self-motivation. We learned a lot through podcasts and through YouTube how-to videos, creating a website, and there's a lot of aspects, legal aspects. So don't limit yourself, but also don't be afraid to reach out to people and just ask how they did it, or, we're more than happy to answer people's questions, like we've been there. So it's nice being able to direct people or help them as little bit as we can from our experience.
Especially now, there's so many resources out there. Talk about YouTube. I made the comments when Chris Fry was here that I had no idea how the stock market worked. I watched a 4-minute YouTube video and I'm like, wow. Well, sadly to say, I learned more from that 4-minute video than I have learned in all my years of going to school.
Yes.
It was at the click of a computer cursor, but it's amazing all that's available today. And it really is, at least from my perspective, almost everything that I've said, whether it be for the church or the podcast, that I'm like, I don't know if that's possible. It's like, boom, there's a website, there's something that's there to help you, and you're like, oh, it's not as big of a monster as I thought it was going to actually be. So it's a cool time that we're living in. But a personal question I want to ask is that you guys are both extremely young, and one of the things that at least for me that I tend to always find is that us young people, I'll include you in here too.
I appreciate
us young people. We tend to always focus on our generation or the next generation, whether it be through technology, so on and so forth. We tend to forget about the older generation, So do you think that with COVID-19 and everybody being isolated, do you think that attitude is going to change? Do you think that the younger generations are going to start to understand the need for what you guys are doing?
I would hope so. I do think so. I think people need to be more educated about it. I mean, if you watch the news or you read the newspaper, you see every day about these nursing homes and the people that are isolated, and there hasn't been visitors since March. But you have to be willing to get that information, or watch the news or see that information. So I think it's more about educating people right now, because I think it'll really hit them. Whereas before they'd say, okay, yeah, my grandma's in a nursing home, but they have activities, or she has friends in there. But right now everyone's isolated to their rooms. You're not really seeing anybody, and that's how we all are. So it really hits home, and you finally see that and understand that better. So just trying to educate people now, now you really understand how these people are feeling every single day. And I don't know, I just think educating people is the best way right now, and trying to get that information out there.
Yeah, definitely. I think this, the period of COVID is allowing people, in their mind, it clicks for them now, because like Allie said, they had to be stuck at home too, and they, people, it was a huge thing, and it's still big, but people started, getting more, thoughts of loneliness. They missed their friends, and this is exactly what happens all the time, not just during a pandemic, in nursing homes, assisted living. Even if, a grandparent passes away and the other grandparent, lives at home alone, and people are finally having those feelings where, you know, normally you wouldn't feel super lonely. You can go
Right.
out with your friends, but yeah. So it's almost like a blessing and a curse, because people are finally becoming more aware of it and the problem. But also, you know, it's taken this to get here. It took a pandemic to
Right.
make people
Exactly.
realize.
Yeah, well, I was talking with a friend of mine, and it wasn't necessarily about, you know, the older generation being at home and being lonely, but we were talking about the fact that, and I never thought about it until they said it, which was, at least prior to COVID, you could tell our attitude towards older people being lonely, and the fact that in like shows or movies, that is always played up as comedy. Like the old people always saying, you know, I don't want to be a burden. And it's like, it's always played up as comedy, not a tragedy. And this same person said, prior to COVID, she always kind of like would look at older people in like nursing homes and be like, man, they're living the life. You know, like I would love to just sit at home, watch TV, and not have anything, you know, to do or worry about. And this same individual was like, after COVID, I realized, oh no, that's living hell. Like it's
Yeah,
not,
honestly.
it's not fun at all. And as people, we have a need for social interaction. It's just like with eating and drinking. If you don't have that social interaction, or you don't keep your mind busy, your mind starts to crumble.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people, I mean, I'm talking personally here too, with COVID, that was a huge eye-opener for me, is seeing able-bodied people, young and old, who, because they're having to be separated, you see their minds start to go, and or they start to get a little stir crazy, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's not normal, you know? And so, like, for me, with my grandma being one of them, I think about her all the time. It's like, oh, okay, this is what she's going through on a daily basis.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So-
and even just, you know, if they were involved in church where that was something that was on their
Right.
schedule and they were able to go somewhere,
Right.
they had a group of friends, or if they all met up at Panera Bread for a breakfast.
Right.
Just how easily you kind of lose your purpose almost, not being able to do those things anymore.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking, but and that leads to even more, like, further decline. So it's a slippery slope.
All right, for our last piece of this reflection episode, I guess you could call it that, was one of my, it's the top number one favorite episode we've ever done, mainly because of who we had on the show. This was someone who I have read his books. I have spent countless hours watching his videos. If you haven't heard of him yet, or you don't know him, his name is Douglas Wilson. He's a pastor over in Moscow, Idaho. Just go onto YouTube and just type in Ask Pastor Doug after today's episode, and just watch. He is so good at answering very tough questions, and he's a master at social commentary. He is just a great mind, witty humor, everything that I've ever wanted in a Christian author. I found in this guy. He's been a huge part of my walk with Christ. He's been a huge motivator for me wanting to get into the ministry, and his wisdom and his lessons and his teaching has just helped me tremendously. And it was such a cool experience to get to sit down with him over a Zoom meeting and get to just kind of pick his brain, and just also watch him and Pastor Anthony get along so well, because they have so much in common as far as their worldview, as far as their teaching styles. So give it up for our last segment, looking at the interview we did with Pastor Douglas Wilson.
A lot of these questions are for folks who are listening, who are tapping into this podcast saying, I've never been to church, or, when I think about pastors, sure, they work one day a week, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
In those 40 years, not just for you, but in general, what you've done with other pastors, tell us about what are two qualities, or maybe three, that are imperative for a minister to have in ministry.
So I would say, and I think this has always been the case, but in the crazy season that we're currently in, it is absolutely essential that a pastor be a vertebrate. He has to have a backbone, because people aren't. What a pastor does is he guides, he leads, he feeds, he protects, and you can't be a shepherd unless you are willing to fight wolves.
Wow.
In Acts 20, Paul tells the Ephesian elders, "I know that after my departure, savage wolves are going to come in and ravage the flock." And so I believe that Chesterton says somewhere that a person ought not to fight because he hates what's in front of him, but rather because he loves what's behind him. And so a pastor, I think, has to be a vertebrate who loves. Right? So sometimes some guys are built for combat, right? But it's one speed, and that's all they do. That's all they do. But the Bible says not to make a belligerent man into an elder. A bellicose man, a man who fights because he loves fighting, is not qualified. But a man who loves to love and doesn't want any conflict at all, ever, doesn't really love. And so the illustration for ministry that I use, I'd probably narrow it down to two main characteristics. One would be commitment to truth, and the other would be commitment to love. And I compare truth to the skeleton, like the bone. A bone is hard, rigid, unyielding. You could clock somebody on the head with it. Truth is just there. Well, love is like the flesh that encases the bone. Love is soft, yielding, but it needs the structure of the bone. If we were all bones, no flesh, we're like that skeleton hanging in the science classroom, right? Every bone in the Westminster Confession of Faith is there and it's in its right place, but it's a dead skeleton. If that's all truth, no love. But if it's all love, no truth, then everybody's a beanbag chair. Just imagine what we'd be like if we had no bones. We'd be an amorphous glob. And much of evangelicalism today is love without bones, love without truth. And so people undulate toward you in the narthex, welcome to our church. And then other orthodoxy churches, truth-oriented churches, it's all bone. And so I would say that a pastor has to have a skeleton where the bones are intact and not out of joint, but he's got to be able to touch somebody and not have it be a clammy skeleton claw.
I imagine, and I agree with you, that's the perfect kind of seesaw that Paul shares with speaking the truth in love.
Right.
But I have just found that people in general are not, they don't do that. Okay.
Right.
And I have found that most people, either by virtue of their personality or just kind of one or the other. What, for you, do you find yourself leaning towards one or the other, love or truth? Maybe not now, but at one point in your life?
Yeah, I would say if you're asking for what I think my factory settings are, I think that I'm truth oriented.
Uh-huh.
I think that if you gave, if I didn't have people around to correct and balance and do that sort of thing, if I was allowed to veer, I think that that's the direction I would veer. Yeah. I'm not a sentimentalist. I love content. I love truth. I love doctrine. But I also have been blessed with having the mentor or the pastor or the model that inspired me the most was frankly my father, who was in ministry for many, many years. And he also was truth oriented. But one of the truths that he learned early on was that truth that isn't applied isn't truth. You're making it false by not putting it into practice.
sort of kind of like the James book of James theme.
Exactly.
One of my favorite stories you shared about your dad, I forget where I heard it. You were talking about how your dad used to stuff, it was like sermon recording tapes in his jacket when he'd go on airplanes.
Or tracks.
Yeah, tracks. Yeah. And then, like you said that he would have one in like Swahili or Hindi, like, and he would just pass them out to people. And he would always have these like hilarious encounters, but he was that connected to just inviting people and talking to people that he would go to that length to connect.
Yeah, he would do things like that, expecting God to match it up with something, expecting God to answer prayer.
All right, guys, I hope you have a fantastic New Year's. I hope you had a good Christmas. I know 2020 has been kind of a rough year and kind of just a really weird and frustrating year. But I ask that you as the listener go into a challenge that I've set for myself, and Pastor Anthony has kind of said too, and that is that we go into 2021 with a different mindset and a more compassionate heart and a more of an understanding that we have with our fellow brothers and sisters. 2021 may be worse than 2020. It might be better. But what I know for a fact is that what's going to make that happen is by us changing our attitude, by us changing our hearts, by us changing our lifestyles and the way that we have, what we've known as just the normal way of living. 2020 has kind of thrown our normal rhythm out of whack. And one of the things that we have discussed previously in this podcast is that in the new rush to go back to normal, we have to think about what parts of normal are worth rushing back to. So as you close this episode, as you go do whatever you were going to do, I just want you to just take a second and really process and think, what difference are you going to make in 2021? Who are you going to help? Who are you going to give life to? How are you going to change yourself? How are you going to improve yourself? And how are you going to make 2021 the year that you and your kids look back upon and say, a lot of changes, a lot of good came from that? Because if we do that, then we give all of the struggles, all of the frustrations, all of the pains of 2020 purpose. If we don't do it, then it's just a bad year. It's just a bad experience. But if we give a purpose to it, if we make it a difference, if we change our outlook, that will make 2021 be a memorable year. And we will look back upon all the things that have happened in 2020 and say it all happened for a reason. All right, guys, this is Seth from Engage Podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next year.